Welcome to A Photographer's Life, the channel that takes you behind the curtain and into the world of professional architectural photography. Join us now for a discussion with members of the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers, America's premier architectural photography organization.
I want to welcome everybody to the January 2026 meeting. We've been doing this for a few years now. I appreciate everybody being here this morning. Today we're going to talk about small market strategies and how to find business and keep business and grow business in a small market. And I just wanted to start it out with an observation. And I did a little digging in the Department of Labor statistics for the recent numbers compared with going back about 25 years. And I discovered something really interesting about how this industry has changed. And it has to do with when digital format became kind of viable as a format that we could use professionally. So up until about 2002, what the industry looked like is that there was kind of a small base as far as professional photographers. Most of the photographers were kind of clustered in the middle as far as professionals. So there was this big middle section of photographers. And then there was this very, this smaller top end of photographers. That has changed really dramatically since digital photography came into its own. And what's happened is that middle section has pretty much disappeared. And this has happened more dramatically in some areas than others, but it's happened pretty dramatically in architectural photography, more dramatically in wedding and portrait photography on the retail side, but in architectural photography, it's just as much. And so that middle area is pretty much gone. And what we have now is this enormous cluster at the bottom, at the base of photographers. And then we have virtually nothing in the middle. And then we have a small area at the top on this upper section. And I think that's where we all are, is in this upper section here, where we're charging a higher rate and we're doing good work. And, we're trying to push the industry forward a little bit. And so the challenge is, how do we stay up there and not see ourselves competing with this enormous base that is price driven and it is continually churning people in and out of it. And that's kind of where the real estate photography market is. And I think it's going to stay for quite a while. David, you probably have some insight on this as well, given your experience.
Well, yeah, I definitely agree. Right around that time when we were going from film to digital, for me, it was more like 2005, and also had the background of stock photography, where at that point, 2006, 7 was my best year. Starting in 97, I started my stock photography, but going from film to digital, a lot more people were picking up a Canon Rebel and shooting stock, where before you'd have to shoot film and get it scanned. So the entry point was a lot easier after that point, after that date. But as far as the competition, yeah, I definitely agree. There's a lot more on the scene, and stock, and the real estate photographers have kind of, I wouldn't say diluted it, but it's brought some of the pricing down to a point where we always have to, I would say, justify the higher rates, because we're more of a magazine quality product that we produce. But getting back to more of the very beginning, when I started in 81 after graduating, it was shooting with a 4x5, shooting with a Hasselblad. So you don't have an instant replay or feedback on the back of your camera to know what you have. So it's definitely a lot easier. And I think that, like you were saying, the digital invention made a lot easier entry point. Plus, let's not forget Instagram. People started shooting with their phone. The phone is very good quality. And they say, this is kind of fun. I want to be a photographer. So you have a lot more people entering. There's less schools. My school, Brooks, is no longer in business, but people can go online, of course, and learn through YouTube and all these other avenues. So it's definitely more competition, but I've always felt there's more need for photography now than ever because of content for Instagram or for your website. So I think that balances it out, that there's more need, but there's also a lot more photographers. My rates, I mean, people can probably debate this. My rates haven't increased like I thought they would increase, so you have to shoot more. And the same thing with stock. Stock prices have gone down, but you just have to still hang in there and know that you're going to get the quantity sales. If I can back up real quick on the market size, can I talk about that yet,
Yeah,
Alan?
yeah.
Okay. So when I came up from California, I was in the Bay Area, but I went to school in Southern California, and I didn't want to go back to San Francisco because I thought it was kind of a harder market to start. In a smaller
Mhm.
market, you get to know people a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But at Brooks, I probably mentioned this before. One of the professors said, "You're never going to lose sleep at night by not having enough work if you provide a good product at a fair price and on time." So I come to Portland thinking that was going to be easy, get in here. Well, it wasn't easy. It was a recession. It was very competitive, and there was a lot of corporate work. I tell people if I was started in Cleveland or Houston or Atlanta, uh, some of these more industrial cities, and I don't want to offend anybody, but it's not the most beautiful, creative cities. You could probably have a lot of work, but Portland was a place that a lot of creatives wanted to come to and start. So it's been interesting. It's been kind of a struggle, but we're all competitive, and we never say, "Hey, we have enough work." And I always want more work, but there's just so much you can handle at one point. Anyway, my point is, in a smaller market, it's easier for people to move in and start the business, right, compared to a bigger market. But it's easier to get to know your potential clients, whether it be ad agencies or architectural firms. I think for me, it was they were a little bit more accepting to somebody that was new to the area.
Hmm.
But the smaller market, we don't have, like I said, this like Seattle or San Francisco have more of the industrial corporate base that could maybe provide more work than a smaller market. So, and again, my stock photography kind of helped with my volatile up and down of the photography market, which, like I mentioned before, is kind of like a farmer. It's up and down, but with stock, it helped even things out,
Yeah.
especially when you're raising a family.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents for now.
Yeah. Um, for those of you who joined us a little bit later than what I announced, there in the chat window, I put a PDF of kind of the outline of what we are going to be going over today. The market segments that I've identified that I wanted to go over and talk about today that are not architects and construction companies and things like that that are what we typically think about is where our business comes from. These are other entities, and we have to approach them as on a business to business basis, where we're going to go in there, and they may not know what an architectural photographer is, and the way this was born out of kind of desperation for me. Going after this kind of business because I was in a smaller market here in Salt Lake City, and at the time that I started out, there were a core group of photographers that were pretty well established doing architectural photography, and it was pretty tough to break into. And so I went directly to businesses that I could do architectural photography for that weren't architectural firms or interior design firms necessarily, things like that. So this is what this came out of. The one thing I wanted to mention, though, is I did put together a package that I would always take with me, a leave behind. And what that consisted of was a page that I printed out on, glossy photo paper on my Canon inkjet printer, which looked really nice, but that had a collage of samples on it of architectural images of mine. And then I also had a rate sheet, which was not a architectural photographer or commercial photographer's rate sheet of, day rate or per image rate. It was a package rate, and that was a lot easier to digest for people in these businesses that hadn't really hired photographers before. And so it was, 5 to 10 images
Mm.
is X amount of dollars. and this is the licensing that you get for that, or 10 to 15 images, or 15 to 20. And I broke it down that way. And that was a lot easier to digest. And that came after a day or two of going out and saying what my day rate or hourly rate was, because that fell flat. And so it was a lot easier to tell these people, this is the number of images you get, and this is the price for those images, and this is how you can use them. And that made total sense to them. This is the price. So that's what I used to do. So I put it in, I had the glossy photo, or the glossy leave behind, and my rate sheet and my business card. And that was all in this, black envelope, which looked really nice, that I went and bought at Office Depot. I bought a box of them. And then it had my, a sticker with my logo on it on there. And they didn't throw those away. And I knew people that called me years later that still had that black envelope that they had hung on to. So I kind of want to go through these different categories of potential clients that you might find in small markets, the way I've got them laid out on this this outline here. And the first one is healthcare. And a lot of times, if we're working in a larger market, the way we get into a healthcare situation is through an architect or an interior designer or a construction company. But there are a lot of hospitals or clinics or these, boutique surgical companies who have a need for architectural photography. And often, if you call on them and ask for the person who's in person, I should say, and ask for the person who's in charge of their marketing, a quick conversation will start that ball rolling. And I still do and have done, within this past year, private surgical clinics and IVF centers and things like that, where it was directly with the clinic. And also I've done with hospitals where they have contacted me directly, separate from, the contractor or the architect or whoever. Another big one is dental practices, especially those that are doing things like implants, dental implants and orthodontics and things like this. I've done a number of those. There was a company I used to do business with. I think they were actually out of Portland, David, and
right.
They used to send me all over the place, and I would do a package, and they flew me all over the place, and I would go in and I would shoot the practice architecturally, and then I would do a few images of the doctor, dentist or orthodontist or oral surgeon or whatever, of him personally, some headshots, and then a couple of him with, some staff members, and then probably a group shot. And they would use that for their marketing. And dental practices are highly competitive. And so for their marketing, that was huge. And I was making a good rate. So I know that the agency that was hiring me was charging more. And these dental practices were doing this all over the country. And I know that's still a thing. And then there were a lot here locally that in the Salt Lake market that I did business with, where I would do the same kind of thing, especially pediatric dentistry, where they would build these elaborate waiting rooms so that the kids had places to play, and they wanted to show those off so that they could market those. Those were really good jobs and paid really well. But they always include a few people shots. So if you're adept at shooting, a few headshots and maybe some interaction with kids and things like that, you don't want to ever show sharp instruments, things like that. You have to be really careful about the fear factor that's associated with those kinds of things. And then, all these specialty clinics, cosmetic surgery, and all of those kinds of clinics, that is really a booming market segment that requires photography. And often they go to somebody that really doesn't have the skills to give them good images of their practice, where an architectural photographer is really adept at doing that. So to me, that's a really easy in if you can get into a situation like that. And calling on them in person is easy.
Before we forget about it, I want to ask about how back in the day you had that package introduction
Yeah.
with a black envelope, but nowadays, if it say there's a new firm in town, how are you approaching them for the first time and introducing yourself to a dental office?
No, I would still go in person.
With an appointment or cold
No,
call?
I would just cold call and drop it off, and then possibly follow up. Once you get the name of the person that's in charge of marketing, and it may be the owner of the practice themselves, but just a simple, I'm a commercial photographer or an architectural photographer, if you choose to say that, but a commercial photographer that, doing marketing photography for practices such as yours, who handles the marketing for this practice? You get that name and then you follow up in 2 or 3 days. It takes a little legwork. I mean, we used to all do that. Now we want to do it virtually. We want to send an email or a text. I think we've lost the power of cold calling and following up with a phone call. The thing is that if you do that, the percentage of sales that you make is astronomically higher than if you're just emailing somebody.
Mm-hmm. So you're going in there and you have your leave behind when you meet with this person, right?
Yeah. And then maybe they call back in a day or two, or maybe they want to talk to you right then and there.
Yeah.
So, point out that when you leave of that black folder envelope, that's the way presentations are done inside businesses.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of photographers, because we are our own business, we're not having that many meetings with ourselves. We're not making those kinds of presentations and handing out a booklet like that across an entire table. So they relate to that. They get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's cheap. I mean, that cost me $1 maybe. At the most, it cost me $1. I mean, you go into Office Depot or whatever and buy a box of those black envelopes, which maybe cost you $20, and then I don't know how much the glossy photo paper costs these days, and to print something out like that, and then a page with your rates on it, it's virtually nothing. But to them, it looks really polished. Yeah.
I'd like to make a point about the discussion about visiting in person. A few years ago, I got a call, actually was off our website, to do a local commercial photography assignment of a racetrack gas station for an architect. And he liked my work and he started giving us, 4 or 5 regional photo sessions. So we went up to visit them at their corporate office and took them to dinner. And out of the dinner, they made a decision to use us nationally based on our work and our relationship. And we didn't expect that, of course. But we're just going up there to thank them for being a partner and for giving us business. Last year, we got 30 assignments from them. So visiting in person is everything. It's the old school. It's the way you used to do it. But when you get face to face with the marketing team, the head of the marketing group, and you have a quality product, it could, we were on the road all last year. It was crazy. So it's powerful. It really is.
Yeah, I think it's a skill that's really been lost.
Another thing, though, is if you get the job directly with the healthcare giver or business, and you bypass the architect and the contractor, engineer, and others that you could sell the pictures to, then when you're done and you've already been paid, now you can show all those pictures to the architect, the general contractor, and everybody else, and sell those, and that's pure profit. And if you did a good enough job, it might introduce you to a new architect, a new contractor, a new product provider, whatever, that will be impressed with your work and hire you to do a bunch more, like Thomas is talking about.
Well, and on that point, we sort of did the traditional way. The architect has been very friendly towards us, and they're very conscious about licensing opportunities with their client and then subcontractors, and they make it very clear to them that that's a separate licensing issue, and they refer us to them. So we've been getting quite a bit of that, the licensing part after the fact, going down to maybe two different subcontractors that want the images for their portfolio. So it's pretty good. But the architect's protecting and understands how important it is to have us to be paid for our work outside of what they paid us.
Yeah, that's absolutely huge. The next bullet point I have on here is senior living, which I've shot a ton of recently, and that's a market that's only going to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another one where each of those facilities is going to have a marketing director and a marketing team. And that's going to be, still a separate situation from whoever the architect was or the designer or whatever. And they're going to have an ongoing need for marketing materials. And again, you may have to direct some people in those shots, but retirement communities, care facilities, rehab centers, those are easy ones, I think. And I've shot dozens and dozens of those over the years. They pay well, they pay on time, and they're not difficult photo shoots to do. And generally, they're really not a lot of work, especially if you give them a checklist ahead of time as to what you want and what needs to be done as far as prepping for the shoot. They're usually really good about that. You sometimes have some HIPAA issues where you need to make sure that you don't show patients without releases, things like that you need to make sure you cover. But senior living is going to be a continually growing market, and that's one that you can contact directly as well. And places where Glenn is, and Thomas, in Florida.
Yeah, we're booming down there.
Yeah,
I've done several in the last couple of years, so I know what you mean.
And then service companies, health spas, hair salons, gyms, athletic, especially there's some specialty athletic things that I've done over the last couple of years, which have been like Pilates and boxing gyms. And there's one called Stretch Authority, which was an interesting one where people go in and pay to have people help them stretch. All these little specialty, often strip mall kinds of things. Those kinds of service companies. It's an easy shoot. It's a small area. The one I didn't put in, I put hair salons, but barber shops. I have shot a number of barber shops over the last couple of years, which are pretty high end. I mean, they charge a really premium rate for a barber, to go in for a beard trim, a haircut, and they're really nice spaces. And those have been fun to shoot. And again, that's something that you contact them directly, and it's usually the owner of the salon that will make the decision on that. And these are kind of one-offs. I'll admit to that. They may not have you back for 5 years, but it's a profitable shoot right away. And so those are something that you can look at. And those are in a small market, you tend to have a lot of those kinds of situations. The next one is government and public buildings. And often these are a little bit protracted as far as getting approvals on, but generally they work out really well as far as the rate that you can charge and the fee. And smaller airports, municipal airports, generally want to attract charter traffic, that kind of thing. Sometimes there'll be a new courts building or city offices, those kinds of things. I've shot a lot of jails and prisons.
You got to get a release for that.
They're not glamorous, but they pay the same. And there are some people that I have had some spin-off business. There was a company that they made modular cells so that when a prison gets built, they built the cell with all the plumbing and electrical and everything in it modular. And so all the contractor had to do was just stack them together and hook them together. This was a company out of Texas, and I did a bunch of stuff for them in these prisons. So that was kind of an interesting shoot. I did have one really bad photo shoot at a maximum security wing in the Utah State Prison. And I would never do that again. That was one where the guards had to walk with the spatter shields up on either side of me. And
was it worth it?
It was not worth it.
And your special charge line item for that, right?
Yeah, that was, I charged a premium for that. And that was to photograph an electronic system in the guard central tower that they had there. And I would never do anything like that again. That was just horrendous. I had people yelling at me the entire photo shoot. So I don't recommend that. But there are a lot of, civic buildings and public buildings and things like that are possible to shoot. And it takes, being aware of when those are built and then contacting city officials about them. I shot one just recently that was an armory that a small city here in the Salt Lake area had renovated to be a meeting space. Not a very big space, but they put a lot of money into it, and they're renting it out for business meetings and wedding receptions and things like that. And that worked out to be a really good photo shoot and very profitable. And I was able to license it to, architect, engineer, builder, on and on and on, as well as the city. So that worked out great. Housing is the next one that I've got up here on my list here. And multifamily housing is kind of where housing is growing right now. And you may or may not get contacted by an architect or a builder for these kinds of projects. But often the developer is not looking very far down the line, and they're going to hire somebody like a real estate photographer who's probably not going to do a very good job in marketing that property. And if you can go in with some images that show them what their property could really look like, then I think that you probably stand a good chance. And I shoot a lot of these. Some of them are not beautiful. Some of them are pretty modest, but they pay exactly the same rate, regardless of whether they're a modest property or whether they're a real high-end property. So you can make the same kind of money. But often it's the property developer that's going to be the point on this, that you need to talk to. And they're going to be the one that's going to make the decision about having the photography done. Often the architect's not all that proud about the project, and the builder's probably really frustrated because it's not been a fun project for them. But the developer wants to get it full and wants to get it leased and wants to have it look really great. And so they're the one that's probably going to pull the trigger on photography.
Just to add on to what you said earlier about modular, I just finished a big project shooting for a company that makes the modules, and they're all multifamily housing.
Oh, okay.
All the ones that I worked on were low-income housing, supportive housing, that kind of thing. But these modules are getting used in apartment buildings and everywhere. And in California, we've got a new law that's been passed about density. So these, because there's a shortage of housing here, like everywhere else. So that's a combination of things. And I'm in the middle, literally right now, these days, of doing outreach to all the other parties that were involved in this. And one of the things, just as an aside, that I did partly as a strategy to gain access to the insides of the buildings was to offer the group that was running the building, which tends to be a nonprofit of some kind, a free photo.
Okay.
Because they were not my client, and I got inside. I wasn't hired to shoot interiors, but I was able to get into a building that had 330 units, and it had two beautiful courtyards, and they were so nice to me. They got me in places I would have normally used my drone for to get photographs from. So that's another potential market that is, as you say, growing, because these multifamily housing is just by default cheaper than buying a house.
Yeah, and it doesn't take a lot of effort really to find out who the decision makers are in these situations. A lot of times all you need to do is search on the property, and you can find the permit listings and things like that.
Yeah.
To see who's paying for this, or who's developing it, or who pulled the permits.
One of the things that I've done is I just put in the address.
Yeah.
And the word architect or contractor, and eventually stuff pops up.
Yeah.
It's a news article, it's a press release, it's something from the city itself that's an approval, from the city council, and it's there. It just takes some digging.
Absolutely. Yeah. The information's pretty easy to find generally for who these people are and who the decision makers are. I wanted to go to another one. Now, I didn't put on like custom home builders. Those, in a small market, those are going to be really kind of tough to make any money at in the long term. So, I mean, if you're in a big market, if you're in Scottsdale or, La Jolla or someplace like that, yeah, knock yourself out. But if you're in a smaller market, that's not going to happen. And so tract builders are probably where you're going to make some money. And some of these national home builders can probably keep you busy. Companies like, D.R. Horton or Richmond America or Meritage or any of these kind of big Toll Brothers, these kind of big home builders, they may be able to keep you fairly busy. Now, I had a home builder that I worked for a number of years, and honestly, that's what really kind of saved things for me for a few years when there was a downturn in the market, because I was working for them on a retainer basis. And I had a conversation with David about this just recently. I guaranteed them 2 days a month, and they paid me a flat rate for those 2 days a month. And that was really a lifesaver. They weren't, amazing homes. They were tract homes, but they would build a model home, and then they would furnish it with their on-staff interior designer. And I would shoot 2 of those homes a month. They were fairly good sized builders, so they did quite a few homes, but I would shoot 2 homes a month, and they paid me a flat rate, and it was a good rate, and it was guaranteed. And I didn't charge them for travel because it was just local travel, and it was, I was shooting digital, and so I didn't really have any hard costs into that necessarily. the thing that worked out well for me in that regard is that, I was able to generate some pretty good images, that, that weren't, spectacular images, but, they were good images as far as what I had to work with as far as these model homes. And so, that worked out okay for me. And I think that's a good place to start if you can offer maybe a retainer. And some of these companies will be happy to just have it's going to cost me this much every month to have this photographer do work for me. That's an easy thing for them if they've got a fixed cost, especially when it's one of these large builders who they're building a lot of homes. And some of these companies, they have a 60 to 90 day build time on a home, and they're building hundreds of homes in a market. And to have you go out and do photography every month for a couple of days, not a big deal to pay you a retainer. So you might have, and some of these other situations may lend themselves to a retainer as well. But it's nice to have that guaranteed income. It's almost like a paycheck. So you might think of it in that regard. The next category I got on this list here is hospitality. And that kind of covers a lot of things. And those are situations where you may or may not have ever come across these clients with an architect or a builder or an interior designer, but they all need photography, and they need updated photography from time to time. And those are the hotels, even in a small market. And a lot of the chains, they will have like a Hilton approved or a Marriott approved photographer that they like to have do their stuff. My experience has been that if you go to the manager of the hotel, that you can become one of those approved photographers fairly easily.
Yeah. Alan, here we have a pretty big tourist industry here. So we have about 8.5 million people come to St. Augustine every year.
Yeah.
One of my biggest clients here is a hotel, and he was going through major renovations, and he hired us to update all his room photos. But as an auxiliary, he called me and asked me if I had any photos of local attractions or things like that. And when I first got here, I loaded up on my stock stuff. It resulted in, when he upgraded all of his rooms, he ordered 90 large printed black and white photos of local attractions for all of his rooms. And that was just out of nowhere. He just said, "Do you have any photos?" And he ordered 96. And they were huge prints that he put in all of the rooms. So there's all this auxiliary stuff that comes out of hospitality and we've done, 10 of the major hotels here in town. But this one just reminded me that there's all these other lines of business from what you have in your vault that can generate, pretty big returns. So
I think the common theme for a lot of us, what you're saying to Alan and Thomas and Glenn and so on, is that personal contact.
Yeah.
There was a photographer, not to be named, and younger, and one of my clients says, David, I appreciate you talk to us, because all he does is just emails. He doesn't want to talk to, it's not that he doesn't want to talk, but it's that generation, that younger generation. And what it looks like we're all kind of in the same, well, not all of us, some of us in the same age group, that we like that contact. And obviously there's some are more comfortable talking to people or doing the cold calls like Alan. That's pretty good to be able to have that type of personality. Anyway, I think we need to keep pursuing that, not back off from personal appearances, so to speak.
Yeah, it's not easy. Honestly, that's not what my nature really is. I'd rather just sit here and type something out. But that's really out of my comfort zone to call. But when I first started out, there wasn't any other way. It was portfolio under your arm and just go out and call on people. So taking around to leave behind is a pretty easy one. And my wife has done the same thing for me as a rep, and she's way better at it than I am. But honestly, it just makes such a big difference to be there in person, to talk to somebody, even just for a few seconds, as opposed to texting them or whatever. Even a phone call as opposed to a text. I mean, I'd much rather have somebody's voice on the line rather than them texting me endlessly. My son is a video editor, and he was doing some stuff for the Sundance festivals here in Park City this week, and he's doing some stuff with Hollywood Reporter, and they needed to talk to him, and he needed to talk to them, and it was this text thing going back and forth. I said, just pick up the phone and just call them and get it over with. And
the other thing I do here, Alan, is my top 5 clients every year. My wife and I take them out to a really nice dinner locally at a great restaurant. It gives us one-on-one time with them away from the business side, and they really love that. I mean,
that's nice.
It's a personal touch that nobody else really does. So
that's really nice.
Yeah, Thomas, that's a good point. Especially this time of year, it might not be super busy. So I've been doing that, making some appointments with my clients that are out of town, and just make a little trip to meet with them and take them out to lunch. So,
oh yeah.
Depends on what our background. Thomas, have you been a photographer for many years? What was your background before photography?
I started as a photojournalist in the Coast Guard back in the 70s. I spent 8 years doing that. And then I went back to college and got degrees in marketing and advertising. And I had a parallel career in the real estate industry that I haven't done. I left that about 15 years ago. But yeah, that was about it. And but I've been a photographer since the 70s. That's where I learned my trade. I was fortunate enough to have the master chief photographer of the Coast Guard as my mentor. And he taught me, of course, it was all film back then, but he taught me everything. And I'm really grateful for learning from him because he was amazing. So that's my background.
Got it. Very helpful.
Under this hospitality, I wanted to bring up event spaces and resorts and amusement parks and bowling centers. Some of those things are ones that we overlook, but I can't tell you how many bowling centers I've shot across the country over the last 10 years. And that has been amazing income from bowling centers. I mean, you wouldn't think that, but I shot for a major bowling manufacturer, and then that kind of spun off into shooting for some privately. And that's big business. And I've shot some private ones that were installations in homes and in private clubs. And I shot one in Miami Beach at a private condo development that was just so over the top, and it had a private ice skating rink in it as well, and just stuff like that. But those kinds of things, and amusement parks and things like that, those really lend themselves to the eye of an architectural photographer. You normally wouldn't think that because you're going to be full of people generally, but that's one area that I've actually done really well financially by pursuing those kinds of things. The next one I've got on this list here is industrial, tech, and manufacturing facilities. This is another one that's not glamorous at all. A data center is not at all glamorous, but for some reason, these companies, and you all don't know the names, they want pictures of these big data centers, and they're kind of a nightmare technically to shoot because they're not lit well. Generally, they're not really pleasant. They have a noise level in them, and they're generally cold. And they're a little technically, they're really kind of a difficult shoot. But if you can get to the decision maker, you can usually come away with a really nice situation there. And manufacturing as well. I just happened onto a situation where a steel fabricator that owned mills around the country wanted photographs inside the mills, and it's, that's an architectural shoot, and it did include people, but I didn't have to pose anybody. It was just people doing what they do. And this was a project that took me a couple of weeks of travel, and started out in my local market just to shoot the mill that was here. And then I said, have you got other, have you lined up photographers for your other mills around the country? And they hadn't. And, off we went. And so that was a really great opportunity just for having asked a question.
Yeah, and last year, Alan, I shot speaking on this that type of property. We did a sanitation building that was a brand new county building that was high tech, and then also a local entity that did the county's electric. So they had a brand new building where they trained all the people that were out in the field, and they had all the wiring and all the equipment, and it was sort of a mixed industrial and office space. And those are two unique things. But city and county entities, they need that stuff when they're promoting their services online. And we had two of those last year that were pretty different for us.
Yeah. Power stations, those kinds of things are a big deal. Sanitation, I photographed 4 or 5 waste transfer stations in the last couple of years. And those are really big projects. And they pay the same as photographing a penthouse apartment. So I don't mind doing that kind of thing.
Training facility is a good one too.
What's that?
A police training facility.
Yeah.
They can be pretty elaborate. The one in St. Johns County was very elaborate, and I got to do a whole lot there.
Yeah, you just kind of have to think beyond what we normally think of as assignments that we get from architects and interior designers and builders generally. And there's just a lot of things out there like that.
Glenn, did you do that one that's on I-95, that big facility? Yeah, that's a great facility. It's really nice.
Yeah. There were 3 different buildings and lots of ancillary things. It was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I did a shoot for Chart House Restaurants when they were a large spread throughout the country. So they just wanted me to do Portland and Vancouver. And then I asked them about what the other markets, like you're saying, the other locations. And I offered a discounted travel because each of the markets, whether it be Arizona or Florida, had 3 or 4 in a cluster. So the key is just kind of reaching out a little bit. And I think it sounds like everybody's good at that. And say, who else is going to, what other locations do you need? Do you want continuity with the same kind of look rather than hiring somebody separately and starting all over again? And then you have the same rate. So I think that's a great point to push the consistency in approaching them with that proposal of that. So
with that idea, David, there's a building product manufacturer that I got in with, and they are very, very specific on what they want. I mean, they want raw, they want bracketed, they want all this stuff. And, they weren't totally satisfied with me the first year that they gave me 10 projects, but it was like, you're learning and we can teach you. You could be one of our photographers. And so now I've done 5 years, about 10 or 12 projects a year. And they feel like they've trained me. They want. And that took some training. I didn't right away know what they wanted like that. But now I'm in their stable.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about, Glenn, there. And
Yeah.
There's a number of product manufacturers that are like that, and those are kind of bread and butter type things. Once you get in with one of those manufacturers, I just burned a bridge with one major one, and if anybody wants to talk to me offline, I'll be happy to tell them who it is. and they
Stay on the line, Alan.
Yeah, I told them where to go. So
I'm not anywhere like Alan. I'm a nice guy. You'll enjoy working with me. I know that sounds a real pain in the ass.
Sometimes you got to do that.
I did the same with the one that Glenn's working for. So not their fault, but anyway, yeah, those those are good to have, and it's nice to have that reliable income stream. I wanted to talk about retail, and specifically, I wanted to give you an example I had about shopping malls and shopping centers. There's one big shopping mall in Salt Lake City that I've done business with, and they opened. It's a big development, and they opened in 2012, and they only wanted. I mean, they got bombarded by everybody wanted to have their photographer come, and the contractors, all the manufacturers that were involved, and the architects, and every product that was involved wanted to have a photographer on site, and thankfully the developer said, we're going to have one photographer, and everybody can license the images from that photographer. And all credit to my wife. She was the one who went to the developer and pitched me, and they said, yeah, we'll have him be the photographer. So
wow.
I was the one who got to do the photography for the project. And the initial photography was a week of photography that I spent there. And that was in 2012. Well, I continue to license the photography that I shot in 2012. I've done updated photography every couple of years. I did some when they had Christmas decorations, and I've done some updates here and there. It continues to be my single most infringed project of any project I've ever shot. And so it's just like printing money basically at this point. But getting in with this, what I did is and this is what happened. In order to get that, the offer was to give the developer the photography license with free of charge. That was the offer, that we would do the photography for them, and their license would be at no charge. And then we would license all of the other parties. And I think initially there were 26 other parties that licensed the images. And then it just continues that we continue to have licensees for those images. And I think I shot around 150 images total on the first go around that week of photography. But had I not approached it that way, and said, if you just have us come in here, we can do this, and you can not have photographers on your property for weeks and weeks and weeks, and that kind of thing. And had I not done that, then we wouldn't have had that income stream, and it would have been messy for them, and it wouldn't have been a good situation for anybody involved. I don't think there would have been such a variety of photography. It would have been just an absolute mess. But you just had to make that offer. And so shopping centers, malls and things like that, I know that malls are kind of in a transition right now. The indoor and outdoor situation is kind of in a transition, and the industry trade publications are kind of back and forth on where that industry is going, but they need marketing photography all the time. They continue to market their stuff on all social media platforms, and in whatever print media that is appropriate for the market that they're in. And so these are companies that really have a need for photography. and it lends itself to architectural photography. Now, you may have some situations where you've got to include some people to make it more of a lifestyle offering, but approaching the property management, and they probably got a marketing team, but the property management group is where you need to start generally, and then they will hand you off to the marketing team. If you go to the marketing person as your first point of contact, you may not get very far. The decision maker is generally going to be the property manager and people that are in the property management office, who will then loop the marketing people into that situation. These are, becoming the enclosed malls are becoming less and less profitable, and things are kind of morphing into outdoor malls and things like that. And then I don't know, things are changing, but those are situations where retail is still a big market for an architectural photographer. And I encourage, especially in a smaller market, to maybe pursue some of those opportunities. Another is car dealerships. Now, this was a surprising one to me. I had a car dealership group that owned a number of dealerships that approached me about photographing the dealerships. And it was photographing low-level aerials to show what their dealership lots looked like, as well as some interiors of their showrooms. And they didn't want to show a lot of people in them, maybe just one or two people interacting, next to one of their most expensive cars. And then maybe a group of people here and there on the lot. And then they wanted some dusk shots, which really kind of showed off their dealership. But this was a really good shoot for me, and it kind of rolled into other situations, and being referred to other dealers and who were who knew this particular dealership group, and ended up traveling quite widespread to do photographs of car dealerships, and having a drone to do low-level aerials of these dealerships was really important. So this was another one that really kind of lends itself to a small market. And there's also some kind of prominent retail stores, standalones. I shot a lot of high-end jewelry stores that, for some reason, like a dusk shot of their jewelry store with all the glowing jewelry in the windows. And they use that in their advertising a lot. And I think there's probably some opportunity for other kinds of retail that shows, if they've got a really nice facade, or if it's a historic building or things like that, that probably shows them really well at a certain time of day or at dusk, that might lend itself to something like that. Again, it's kind of a one-off, and you may not come back for 5 years, but in a small market, that might help you in a certain month.
So, Alan, I'm impressed that you're able to make these contacts directly, because, for instance, the shopping mall, the one we have here, they're going to have their own agency or marketing firm, and everything goes through them. So you're able to go directly to the decision maker without having to go through that marketing firm or the agency.
Yeah, my wife went to the mall manager, and that was the starting point. And then the mall manager looped in the marketing director for the mall. Now they had retained an advertising agency for the mall, and that advertising was all very lifestyle. It was tight shots of people with shopping bags and that kind of thing.
Okay,
but the mall really was. The architecture of the mall was really unique. This mall is called City Creek Center in Salt Lake City, and it takes up 2 city blocks. It has a retractable sky, roof. It's a pretty big deal. It was a big, expensive project, and it needed some really good architectural photography. And so that's kind of where they were looking to go with it. And I don't think that they trusted the advertising agency, and they just didn't want all these photographers on the property. Well, they didn't want photographers on the property at all. In fact, their security will run a photographer off the property if they show up.
Right.
They're really pretty careful about that. In fact, when I was on the property, I had to have a lanyard with a badge and a safety vest the whole time I was on the property. So they're pretty careful about that. But yeah, they now other malls in my market were not like that. But even still, the point of contact that I made first was the mall management rather than the people that were doing the advertising. And they seem to be the ones who pulled the trigger on having architectural photography done. Now the shots with, the lifestyle shots with, people with shopping bags in front of a store, that was entirely somebody else that was going to do that.
That's
and
what
I didn't want to do that anyway. So
yeah, very, very good information. Now, when you are presenting cold calling, you said you do what you drop off, but these other companies, you're actually giving them your rate sheet at that time, and it's a package rate sheet?
I do. I give them a 5 to 10 images, a 10 to 15 images, a 15 to 20 images, and I give them a set price for that. And I also tell them what the licensing is for that. And that it's an unlimited license for all media, but it's non-transferable. It's a single party license that's non-transferable. And my disclaimer is pretty long. It's a paragraph that talks about who can use it and who cannot. It's mostly who cannot. So that they cannot hand it off to any other, that the individual stores can't use it. That contractors, subcontractors, anybody else like that can't use it. And I've run into some situations where individual stores have used it, and those are infringements. And mall management knows that, so I've gone after those. So that's a situation that I don't feel bad about, since I've crossed that path already with the mall management. But if they wanted to buy a bulk license for clients and potential clients, and I do this with office buildings as well. Sometimes I'll license photographs of an office building. So I'll photograph the building exterior, daytime and dusk, and then the lobby, daytime and dusk, and then maybe one or two floors, some specific lobbies that the mall management is interested in, and they use that for leasing. And so the building management uses that as their leasing portfolio. Occasionally, I'll have one of the tenants that will use that image, and that's an infringement because I've already licensed that to the building owner or the building management, but it's non-transferable to any tenants. I had recently had a case where the building management had infringed, and it was a pretty big settlement. But then they bought a continuing license so that they could license it to tenants, that group of images. So, but that doesn't happen very often. And then the last one is commercial real estate. I don't work with real estate agents per se, but commercial real estate, often I'll work with a developer who's putting in, say 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 warehouses that they're building, and I'll photograph those. I'll find, usually you'll get a pretty good lead time on somebody announcing that and then putting it in, and the build time is usually 6 months to a year for those tilt-up warehouses, and they're really boring to shoot. And you usually need a drone. In fact, you can usually always shoot everything with a drone, but I'll shoot those. I did a bunch of those in the Bay Area. In fact, I go there about every year and shoot in the Bay Area for a certain developer, and I shoot them all with a drone. I never walk around with a camera because they're so big. They're 1 million square feet. A lot of them are Amazon, and those are really easy. But a lot of those are popping up now in smaller markets because it's cheaper to build them there. And if they're near some kind of a transportation hub, which Salt Lake City is, we're getting just acres and acres of these tilt-up warehouses and data centers. So
I'd also like to just as an aside, a lot of these multifamily unit things that I've just shot, I did entirely with a drone.
Yeah.
And even depending on how many people around, drop that drone down to 6 feet.
Yeah.
And it brackets, you get very good photos, you can get good video, but the ease with which you can photograph a large building, which is to say the speed, and since time is money, it's kind of amazing. I've been very happy. That was kind of a discovery. I know we've had this discussion before, but even if you get up 10 or 12 feet, that beats being on a ladder. And you can just turn the thing so easily, bracket, and get very good photos. They're level. So, so they're already perspective corrected much of the time. So anyway, just for large buildings, it can be just a great way to go.
Oh, it's a lifesaver for me. I mean, to not have to walk around those buildings. My son and I went last year, and we did in one day, we did a building in Stockton, Livermore, Tracy, San Jose, and Gilroy. We did all of that in one day.
Amazing.
Buildings. And I had budgeted 3 days, but I did it all with the drone and never got my tripod out. That was a 1-day project for us. And so we had, a day in San Francisco, a day in Marin County. It was, that was a pretty good trip for us. But excellent point, Barry. I appreciate that. I've done a lot of talking. I appreciate your patience with me. We've covered a lot of ground. I hope it's been helpful. These are all things that I personally made money on. I mean, these have all worked. And I hope it's been helpful to go over these different things. And I'd like to hear from any of you that have got some insights on anything we may have covered or may not have covered. Is there anything that anybody wants to bring up to us?
I just have one question on some of these smaller things like restaurants and bowling centers. Have you run into problems where people just use stock footage instead of hiring you?
I haven't. Usually the design is so specific in these bowling centers, in the furniture and the way that the walls are painted, the masking units above the lanes, all those kinds of things are so specific in the design that the bowling center has chosen that each one looks a lot different. I used to shoot for Brunswick Bowling, and they would send me all over the country just because everyone was different. And I haven't seen any two that are the same. Some of them look similar, but no two were ever the same. And so they wanted specific photography, especially in some of these custom installations where it was like a private club kind of thing, or even somebody's private bowling lanes that they had in their home. those were really amazing installations. Some of the ones that we did in private homes. But those were fun shoots, except for the fact that in large bowling centers where my poor wife had to handle every ball in the bowling center in order to make sure everything was aligned perfectly. And, yeah, that was not fun for her. Those were good shoots. And one of the things I want to mention too is that you also add in food shots generally in those kind of situations. So there's some extra billing there too, because they usually want to have some food shots. So if you're adept at food photography, which some of us who, started out as commercial photographers, not necessarily architectural, that's kind of fun to do a little food photography here and there. Only a little bit, but.
So how important are the websites to everybody? Because I was looking up a couple of yours and some of you don't even have one as far as I can tell.
Well, I just had to pay for extra bandwidth on mine, so I guess mine's important.
Yeah, it's my go-to spot when I'm referring to our work. So I always send everybody there. It's more like a showcase than anything. It's not an e-commerce site. It's just pure, contact us at this number, and here's all the different types of properties we do. But it's important.
Oh, yeah. Obviously, besides your social media, you got that website you have to direct people to. And I'm thinking about going to a different platform from what I've got now. So that's going to take some doing.
Yeah. We don't do any social media at all. It's all referrals. And we haven't done anything in the 9 years we've been here in St. Augustine.
The only bump I get from social media is if I put stuff on LinkedIn.
Right. You talked about that.
Otherwise, it's the other platforms are kind of pointless for what I do.
Some of my other photography buddies, they swear by having their blog on their website, and they get a lot of work from just having that blog up. I don't know if it has to do with SEO or whatever, but they said blogging is very important, even if you just take some of your social media copy and put that on the website. So I need to do better job on that, because in the past, blogging always took all this time and I didn't want to do it, but I think I need to have that.
I have not entertained a blog on my website, but from what I understand, it does help your SEO. It'll bump your page up in the Google rankings, search rankings.
I don't get anyone searching for me and getting work that way. What my website's for is I get a lot of referrals, and it doesn't matter to the client how well they like the referral person. If they say, well, go ahead and try Glenn Hettinger, he's really good at such and such, they're not going to think about using me until they look at my website and see that I'm as good as their buddy said I was.
Yeah.
That's what I want it for, is to just back up my referrals that I'm as good as they say I am.
Yeah, they want to see the portfolio.
Yeah.
One thing that's increased traffic on my website I found is I've got a tab which links to my Pixie set galleries, and I just call them project galleries, and that links to on Pixie set I've got dozens and dozens of my projects where I've got the entire portfolio of the photo shoot on there, and so I get a lot of people that go directly to the Pixie set gallery because they can search. Google indexes those galleries, but they'll also, click through and look at those project galleries, and I can see from my statistics on my my web host that I get a lot of traffic through that, and I get a lot of stock sales actually too. People licensing stuff that they see there. Well, everyone, thank you. I appreciate you showing up here today. This has been a good discussion. I hope it's been useful to those that have come to this discussion. We'll post this here within the next week. If you want to re-listen to it, and hopefully, if you want to download that handout that I did that lists all these different bullet points that we've talked about, it's in the chat window there. We didn't hear from some of you, but welcome and thank you for joining us just the same. We'll do another one of these. I think we've got it scheduled for, let me look it up here really quick. February 20th is the next one that we have scheduled. As yet, we don't have a firm idea of the topic. So I'm open to suggestions. This one was suggested to me a few times by different people, and so I thought we'd jump on this, and I appreciate those that thought this was important right now. I know that some in smaller markets are struggling just a little bit, and I hope this will be helpful. And anything else that you might come up with, let me know. We'll be doing some more of the show and tell videos that we did last month. We'll be recording and posting those here in the next month or so. And then I've also got a couple more interviews scheduled with members of our group. So we're looking forward to those as well. Thanks to everybody. So if there's nothing else, we'll close this. And thanks again to everybody that's attended.
Thanks, Alan.
This has been another episode of A Photographer's Life. If you've enjoyed this program, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. A Photographer's Life is brought to you by the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers. This episode is copyrighted and may not be used in full or in part without the written permission of the AIAP. Please join us again soon for another inside look at the world of professional architectural photography.